The sound that stopped billionaire Adrian Kingsley's heart wasn't a scream. It wasn't an alarm. It was laughter. A bright, innocent, joyful laugh echoed through the silent halls of the mansion, a sound he hadn't heard in over 3 years. He froze outside the nursery, his hand still resting on the doorknob. His twin children, Ethan and Emma, hadn't laughed since the terrible accident that had left them paralyzed from the neck down. The world's greatest doctors had called their condition hopeless. Therapists had come and gone. Expensive treatments had failed. The mansion had become a place where silence ruled every hallway. Yet today, someone had made them laugh. Adrian slowly pushed the door open. There, sitting on the carpet in her simple blue maid's uniform, was Grace, the newest housemaid. She had placed colorful paper stars all over the room, balanced a toy rabbit on her head, and was making the funniest faces imaginable. His twins were smiling, tears streamed down their tiny faces as they laughed. With all the strength their fragile bodies could muster, Grace hadn't noticed Adrian standing at the door. She simply continued telling an imaginary story about a rabbit who wanted to become king of the moon. Adrian felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope. But what he discovered over the following days would shake his entire... Well, before we continue this unforgettable story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who believes kindness can change lives. Don't forget to subscribe to Kindness of Power for more heartwarming stories that inspire hope. We'd also love to know where you're watching from, so tell us your city and country in the comments below. Adrian Kingsley had built a billion-dollar empire before turning 40. His company stretched across continents. His name appeared on magazine covers. People admired his intelligence, discipline, and unstoppable determination. But behind every headline lived a father who blamed himself every single day. 3 years earlier, he had promised his twins a weekend camping trip. Instead, a last-minute business emergency forced him to cancel. Feeling guilty, he allowed his personal driver to take the children to a nearby lake with their nanny. A speeding truck ignored a red light. The collision changed everything. The nanny died instantly. Ethan and Emma survived. But severe spinal injuries left both children unable to move. Adrian buried himself in work because work was the only place where problems had solutions. His children, however, needed something money couldn't buy: time, love, presence. One by one, every caregiver quit. Some couldn't handle the emotional weight. Others simply treated. The twins liked patients instead of children. Then Grace arrived. She was quiet during the interview. She had no impressive recommendations. No university degree, no medical certifications, just gentle eyes and a soft voice. Mrs. Eleanor, Adrian's elderly housekeeper, had insisted. "Please give her one chance," Eleanor begged. "There's something special about this young woman." Against his better judgment, Adrian agreed. Now, standing outside the nursery, he wondered if Eleanor had somehow known. The next morning, Adrian canceled every meeting. Instead of flying to New York as planned, he quietly stayed inside the mansion. He wanted to observe, not interfere, just watch. Grace entered the nursery carrying a basket, not of medicine, but of ordinary household items. Wooden spoons, old socks, colorful ribbons, plastic cups. She turned them into puppets, pirates, princesses, astronauts. Every object became part of an adventure. The twins didn't just watch, they imagined. They participated with their eyes, smiles, and laughter. Grace spoke to them as if they could do anything. Never once did she say, "Poor babies." Never once did she pity them. Instead, she asked, "Captain Ethan, should we sail left or right?" Emma blinked twice. Grace nodded dramatically. "Princess Emma has decided we must rescue the dragon instead." The room exploded with giggles. Adrian couldn't understand it. The world's most expensive therapist had failed. A maid with ribbons and socks had succeeded. Days turned into weeks. Something remarkable began happening. The children became more responsive. They slept better. They smiled more often. Their doctors admitted their emotional health had improved beyond expectation. Yet, Grace never took credit. Whenever someone praised her, she simply smiled. "They're wonderful children," she'd say. "I'm only listening." Listening. Such a simple word. Yet Adrian realized he hadn't truly listened to his children in years. One rainy afternoon, he accidentally overheard Grace talking softly to Emma. "I know you're scared." Emma's eyes filled with tears. But brave people aren't the ones who never feel afraid. Grace gently brushed a strand of hair away from Emma's forehead. "They're the ones who keep smiling anyway." Adrian quietly stepped back into the hallway. His own eyes burned with tears. That evening, he asked Eleanor, "Where did Grace work before coming here?" Eleanor hesitated. She never said much. Everyone has a past. She only mentioned caring for someone she loved. Adrian ordered a background investigation. Not because he distrusted her, because he wanted to understand her. The report arrived. 3 days later, what he read stunned him. Grace had once studied pediatric physical therapy at one of the country's finest universities. She had ranked near the top of her class. Then she disappeared. No graduation, no professional license, no employment history afterward. Instead, years spent working as a cleaner, a waitress, a gardener, a maid. Why? Nothing made sense. Someone with her talent should have been running children's rehabilitation centers. Instead, she was folding laundry in his mansion. Adrian decided to ask her directly. The opportunity came one evening after the twins had fallen asleep. "You've been hiding something," he said gently. Grace looked down. "I'm not hiding. You were training to become a therapist." Silence. "You never finished." Her fingers tightened around the folded blanket she was holding. "No." "Why?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she whispered words Adrian never expected. "Because my little brother needed me more than my dreams did." She explained that her younger brother, Noah, had been born with a severe neurological condition. Their parents passed away within months of each other. At just 20 years old, Grace became both sister and mother. Every tuition payment became hospital bills. Every dream became another sacrifice. She left university without complaint, worked wherever she could, fed Noah, bathed Noah, read stories to Noah, held his hand through countless surgeries. Adrian listened without interrupting. "And your brother now?" he asked quietly. Grace smiled sadly. "He passed away last year." The room became painfully silent. "He was only 16. Adrian didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," Grace nodded. "I miss him every day." Then she looked toward the nursery. "When I tell stories to Ethan and Emma," her voice trembled. "Sometimes I imagine Noah is laughing too." Adrian's heart broke. For the first time in years, he realized the woman everyone called the maid possessed a wealth no billionaire could ever purchase. A heart strengthened by unimaginable sacrifice, unconditional love, and quiet resilience. But Adrian still didn't know the biggest secret Grace had been carrying into his home. And when that truth finally came to light, it would change every life inside the Kingsley mansion forever. Adrian couldn't stop thinking about Grace's story. Night after night, he replayed her words in his mind. "My little brother needed me more than my dreams did." Those words haunted him because they exposed a painful truth about his own life. Grace had given up everything for someone she loved. Adrian, despite having unlimited wealth, had spent years believing that earning more money was the best way to care for his children. He had mistaken providing for them with being present for them. The next morning, instead of leaving for another board meeting, Adrian did something that shocked everyone in the mansion. He had breakfast with Ethan and Emma. Grace watched quietly from the kitchen doorway as Adrian struggled to feed his twins. It wasn't easy. He spilled juice. He held the spoon awkwardly. He apologized every few minutes. The twins laughed. For the first time since the accident, their father laughed with them. That simple breakfast lasted nearly 2 hours. It became the happiest meeting Adrian had attended in years. Over the following weeks, the mansion slowly transformed. Business calls no longer interrupted bedtime stories. The dining room was no longer empty. Every evening, Adrian joined Grace in reading adventures about pirates, explorers, astronauts, and magical kingdoms. The enormous house finally sounded like a family home instead of a luxury hotel. One afternoon, however, something unexpected happened. Emma blinked rapidly while trying to reach for one of Grace's paper stars. Her right index finger moved, only slightly. But it moved. Grace froze. "So did you see that?" she whispered. Adrian rushed forward. The movement was tiny, almost impossible to notice, but it was real. Their neurologist was called immediately. After a long examination, the doctor smiled cautiously. "This isn't a miracle," he explained. "It's something just as powerful." Adrian held his breath. The children's emotional recovery has dramatically improved their neurological engagement. While we cannot promise full recovery, hope is no longer unrealistic. Hope. The very word Adrian had buried years ago. Soon, new rehabilitation sessions began. But this time, everything was different. The doctors didn't work alone. Grace attended every session. She remembered techniques from her unfinished studies. She turned painful exercises into games. Instead of counting repetitions, she created adventures. Every stretch became climbing a mountain. Every movement became steering a spaceship. The therapists couldn't believe the children's enthusiasm. One senior specialist finally asked Adrian, "Where did you find this young woman?" Adrian smiled proudly. "She found us." Months passed. Ethan learned to move 2 fingers. Emma slowly regained slight movement in one arm. Progress was slow, painfully slow, but every tiny victory felt enormous. One evening, Adrian sat alone in his study looking at Grace's old university records. An idea entered his mind. The following morning, he drove Grace somewhere without explaining why. She looked nervous. When they stopped, she stared through the windshield. It was her old university. "I don't understand," she whispered. Adrian handed her an envelope. Inside was an official letter. The university had accepted her back into the pediatric rehabilitation program. Every tuition payment had already been covered. Books, transportation, living expenses. Everything. Grace's hands began shaking. "You?" Adrian interrupted gently. "No. You earned this years ago. I only removed the obstacles." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I can't leave the twins." "You won't." Grace looked confused. Adrian smiled. "The university offers evening classes. I already spoke with them. They've agreed to accommodate your schedule." Grace could barely breathe. For years, she had convinced herself that dream was gone forever. Now it was suddenly alive again. "But why?" she asked through tears. Adrian answered with complete honesty. "Because someone once sacrificed their future for family. It's time someone believed in yours," Grace cried openly. Not because of the money, but because someone had finally seen her, not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a person whose dreams still mattered. Word quietly spread throughout Adrian's company. Employees noticed changes. Their billionaire CEO no longer measured success only by profits. He introduced scholarships for workers' children, expanded medical benefits, created paid family care leave, started funding rehabilitation centers for children with disabilities. When reporters asked what inspired these expensive changes, Adrian never mentioned business strategy. He simply said, "I learned that kindness produces the greatest return on investment." The headlines spread across the country. Yet the greatest reward never appeared in any newspaper. It happened one sunny spring afternoon. Grace was helping Emma practice another simple movement. "Reach for my hand," she encouraged softly. Emma concentrated harder than ever before. Her tiny arm trembled, her fingers stretched, slowly, painfully. She touched Grace's hand. Grace gasped. Adrian dropped the book he was reading. The therapists stood frozen. Emma had done it, for only a second, but she had done it. The room erupted into tears and applause. Ethan laughed so hard he nearly cried himself. Grace knelt beside Emma, gently kissing her forehead. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. "No," Adrian said, wiping away tears. "You believed she could." And belief, he realized, had been the missing medicine all along. 2 years later, Grace walked across the university stage to receive her long-delayed degree in pediatric physical therapy. The loudest applause came from the front row: Adrian, Ethan, Emma, and Eleanor. The family stood together, cheering until Grace laughed through happy tears. After the ceremony, Adrian handed Grace a small box. Inside was a silver nameplate. It read, "Grace Foundation for Children's Rehabilitation." Confused, she looked at him. "I've purchased the building," Adrian explained. "It's yours to lead." Grace stared at him, speechless. "I don't know how to run a foundation." Adrian smiled. "You already have. You've been changing lives since the day you walked into our home." Years later, hundreds of children would receive treatment there regardless of their family's income. Parents who had nearly given up would find hope again. Doctors would study Grace's compassionate approach, discovering that healing wasn't only about medicine, it was also about love, patience, imagination, and dignity. As for Ethan and Emma, they never fully recovered. But they recovered enough to walk short distances with assistance, attend school, make friends, and dream about their futures. To Adrian, that was more valuable than every dollar he had ever earned. He often looked back to the day he arrived home unannounced, expecting to inspect his staff. Instead, he found a maid sitting on the floor, making 2 broken-hearted children laugh. That single unexpected moment transformed a grieving father, restored 2 young lives with hope, revived one forgotten dream, and proved a timeless truth: the richest people in the world are not always the ones with the most money. They are the ones whose kindness leaves others richer in hope. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Kindness of Power, like this video, and share it with someone who believes that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. And before you go, don't forget to tell us in the comments, what city and country are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you and welcome you to our growing family.